and and you know that she will. I'm very happy to be here. Today we'll talk about one of my businesses, which is my family business, the one I started off in the United States in the jewelry industry. But it's a very specific niche in the jewelry business, very traditional, and it's cameos, which for the ones of you who don't know what they are, it's hand carvings on seashells and other materials like coral and ivory. Very, very old school. My family started actually this business, the manufacturing of it and the tradition of it, years and years ago, over 150 years ago. And I am the sixth generation in my family business, which is quite unusual. If you think about it, 6 generations straight, the same family, in the same place, in the same small town. And also it's quite unusual in the industry, in the luxury business, to be in a business like cameos. They belong only to one place in the entire world. Basically, any cameo that you see, it's manufactured in a small town, which is called Torre del Greco. I just want to lower the volume here. It's very Neapolitan music. It's a small town called Torre del Greco. It's near Naples, by the Mount Vesuvio, the volcano. And I just want to share some pictures. Let's see this. How do you turn the volume down? It's a very well. And it's a very small town by in the Bay of Naples, between Capri, Sorrento, and Napoli, and it's the only place in the world where cameos are manufactured. So it's something very interesting, because anything in the world right now, it can be manufactured, and is manufactured in many places. I mean, even traditional products like the Murano glasses, they're famous from Florence, from Venice, the small island of Venice. But then, you can find the same, a knockoff of it from China or Korea or Spain. While cameos have not been knocked off for one reason, because it's not about the product, but it's about the tradition and the craftsmanship behind it. It's not just about the seashell or the lady profile on it. It's about the quality that it's in it, and the fact that the master artisans work on that, and they pass to the next generation the artistry, and not working in a factory environment. They're just like any painter or sculptor would be. The only thing is the difference is that we then apply that to jewelry, and you make it something more or less fashionable or luxurious. It can be a gifty or can be luxurious. In the years, in the last 150 years, maybe, my family never had problems to sell it. Basically, people from all over the world, especially in the beginning, in the 1800s, in the turn of the century, people from all over the world would just come to Italy and buy cameos as a gift and a souvenir from Italy to bring back to their countries. In other periods of times, they became more fashionable when royalties and aristocrats from all over Europe actually would adopt and use cameos as their most important crown jewels, like Napoleon or Queen Victoria, and then became something more commercial, maybe in the 1950s, 1960s, and creating though a bigger business. My challenge, probably, as the last generation of my family, was to kind of like do something less commercial and modernize it a little bit. In that, which is the toughest thing in any business, because how do you take this music off? Here you go. Which is very beautiful music, by the way. If you want to know, I'll tell you the name. And it's very difficult because after hundreds of years of manufacturing something, obviously there is an imprint of the design. I mean, you all study design, and the years and years of making the same things also become like the image of that product, and it's difficult to shift from one side of the business to the other side to make people change the image they have of one product. So for me, that was particularly difficult, and I did it only out of passion, because I also started another business on my own with a friend of mine my age, totally separate from my family business, in a more always in jewelry in a very modern way, in gold jewelry, very trendy, with the magazines, in fashionable stores. So my problem was how to make cameos become like more appealing to a different audience in another way. And it came, in New York, the chance, as always happens, and in a very strange but very interesting way, because Sarah Jessica Parker started to I noticed that Sarah Jessica Parker started to wear a lot of cameos in their first season of her show. And I noticed she liked them because she had them in all sorts of forms. But obviously, only I could notice that they were fake. They were plastics and resins and not real things. So one day I was talking to a friend of mine in New York at dinner, who happened to be an editor of a fashion magazine, and he said, "Oh wow, your cameos are going to be now popular because Sarah Jessica is wearing them in the show." I said, "Well, the problem is that they're fake. So probably the guys selling in the street are going to make money." And so he said, "Well, why don't you just send her a real one and tell her that you appreciate the fact that she's wearing them?" So in a very naive way, so without consulting a PR agency or marketing firm or having a business plan, knowing what to do with it, I just packed a cameo. I sent it to her agency, actually. I walked to the agency. It was winter and was snowy, and it was in Tribeca. So it was a far walk. I left it with a very snotty and attitudey assistant. And when I left, I knew that she probably had sold it on eBay the next day, or probably thrown it out the window. I was pretty sure about that. But incredibly enough, about a week later, I was in my apartment, which was my office at the time, and it was 10 o'clock at night. Probably I was watching TV on my couch, and the phone rang, and this woman asked for me. So I said, "Oh, no, it's me who's calling," and she said, "It's Sarah Jessica." And at the time, I had a friend. Her name was Sarah Jessica, actually. She only went by Sarah. And she knew that this like little PR move that I tried in a very strange way. And I said, "Oh, come on, Sarah, stop it. It's late. What do you want?" No, she said, "No, it's me, it's Jessica Parker. I received your cameo, and I want to talk to you." So at that point, I realized it was her. We spent. She was lovely. Lovely, really. We spent probably 15, 20 minutes on the phone. She told me why she loved cameos and why she was wearing in the show, and that it reminded her of her family, her grandmother. They didn't have much money, and the only piece of jewelry their grandmother had, and there was like the jewelry that she was wearing on the Sunday or big events, was a cameo. And so her and her sisters, were infatuated by the romantic and the sentimental value of it. And she was touched by the real cameo. And then we realized that she had just gotten another one by her husband during honeymoon, and it was also another cameo from me. Although she bought it in Hawaii during the honeymoon, we realized it was mine from the store that was selling it. So it was like this series of coincidences, and from that, at that point, she said, "I want you to come to the studios because I'm going to wear it in the show, and I want you to meet Patricia Field, and I'll, just come in the next couple of days." So I was like, stunned. I couldn't tell anybody. I was alone. So now you're going to love this. So it comes the moment when she said, "Okay, get my number." And I said, sure. And so everything was dark, just my TV on. And it was very dark. And I was trying to find a pen. And as it usually happens in this case, is you can't find a pen. So you try to find a pen, and I couldn't hold her anymore. So at one point, I thought, okay, I'll just try to memorize it. The moment I said, she said, you find a pen? I said, yes, I found a pen. She gave me 100 numbers. Her assistant, her doorman, her second assistant, the number of the apartment, the number of the house, and the number of the studio. So it was impossible to memorize anything. So at the end, she said, okay. And I said, sure, bye. I hung up. I had no numbers, nobody to believe me ever again. So I lost the chance. In that moment, I lost the chance. I tell everybody, of course, the next day I try to show off, but I really thought, okay, everybody's like, okay, you gotta find him. Like, how am I gonna find her? It was the height, of Sex and the City. Until one day, because when things have to happen, they happen. Until like a few weeks later, I was walking with a friend late at night, very late, on 64th between Park and Lexington. And we see these trailers, one after the other, and trailers, lights. And I thought, oh, wow, they're shooting a movie. So, and let's see, what movie is it? So we see one big trailer with a sign, and they said, Sex and the City, Wardrobe, which was exactly the number, actually, that she wanted me to call a few weeks earlier. So my friend said, well, here's your chance. I mean, if you didn't lie, that's... So I kind of like knocked the door. It was like probably 1 o'clock in the morning. And this crazy woman opened up with a big cowboy hat, red hair, cigarette, and she said, "What's up?" And I said, "Oh," I tried to say something. Like, I don't remember. I was like, "Oh, cameos." And she said, "Oh, you're the cameo guy." I said, "Come in," and it was Patricia Field. So they were there. They were shooting in the church nearby, some wedding scene, and so they were just like. Waiting for the girls to come in and out of the wardrobe. And they actually showed me all, the Polaroids of the pictures with the cameo that she was wearing. So it was real. I didn't dream about it. And then later on, I stayed there probably all night. And later on, Kim Cattrall came on, and Sarah Jessica Parker came in the wardrobe just, for work. And so we met, and there was... So from that moment on, I had the proof that she was wearing it. Some editors found out, actually WWD editors, they're always on, the Women's Wear Daily. They heard about, these cameos that she was wearing, so it was probably a new trend because cameos have not been used in high fashion, high trend for years, many years. So it was really a new thing because you get something that's never been cool, and then it's all of a sudden Sarah Jessica Parker is wearing it on Sex and the City, and all of a sudden the same thing. It's very cool, and it's object of desire. And I was giving interviews to Vogue editors or W editors, so like, wow, how did you come up with that idea? And while I haven't come up with any idea because my family has been doing that for 150 years. But that tells you that many times, and most of the time, especially in the fashion industry, it's not so much to do something new, but also to get something old or something that's been done and style it in a different way or show it in a different way. Sometimes show it in a different way, it's the key, because that's what actually editors do in a magazine. They don't create anything, they don't make anything necessarily, but the way they edit a page with different things, those different things will become a success at some point or a new trend, while they were out there the entire time. The story goes that from WWD and a few interviews in the magazine, the best of the department stores in America, Neiman Marcus, called because they knew that there was this new designer with new type of jewelry, and they wanted to see the collection. So they saw the collection, the fashion director first, then the buyers, and they launched in their 10 best stores in Beverly Hills, Chicago, and everywhere else out there. And I started to set up a company basically just to reinvent my family business. Now you have to understand that from when you have a family, you work in a family company. I don't know if any of you has any experience like that, but it is very hard. I mean, it's in a way it's a privilege because you already have a job, you don't have to interview. But if you would really want to change something or you want to do something new, it's almost impossible because you are fighting not just with your own boss, but you're fighting with, in my case, 5 generations before me. And my father would say, your grandfather would have never done that, and we go back to the 1850s. So it's like you're always stuck there, and the risk is to be jaded in doing something that's been always done, so it's been working, but not taking any challenge, any new risk. And if you don't take risk, I mean, you can't innovate. So I started to a little bit, pushing it. And the good thing was that I moved to New York, and I was kind of like a little offspring of my family company, so I could do things in a different way. And so I started to approach different stores. I started to approach different editors. And actually, I realized that probably the magazines will always come before even the distribution, because if you approach a store, whether it's a department store or an independent store, any kind of wholesale level, and you don't have anything else to say except this is a beautiful product, they'll just don't get it. I mean, it's tough because especially in at a big, in the big picture, buyers of large corporations, of department stores or TV networks, they have to work on spreadsheets, and they have to, make numbers match. So what works in this country, and especially in this industry, at this point, you have to provide an entire package. You have to present a cool product, in a very great assortment, easy to understand, and you got to have press. If you don't have press, nobody will believe. I mean, you will hardly find a buyer of a big company or an important company who will endorse you, who will, take a chance, because everything is media oriented. Everything is pushed by the press, and if you have a product that has already a little bit of a press backup, it's half sold already. If you don't, then you got to work. I mean, you got to really do all your best to sell it. But in this time, people buy first from the magazines, and especially in fashion, in jewelry, in accessories. It really is like that. Sometimes it's scary to realize it, but you exist only, and that product exists only if it's on the cover of InStyle or in a page of W magazine or featured by Vogue magazine, and so whether we like it or not, and I'll tell you that sometimes I don't like it, we have to work with it, and we have to make it work, because it's all about the visibility, and without visibility, you can be Michelangelo, you can be, Valentino, but nobody will know. And you have to show people what you do, and the best way is not only to convince the consumer, but it's to convince the trade, the business people, that you are worth it through those magazines. Obviously, it's it's very important. I mean, in a family business, it's always very important to innovate without trying to destroy the past. I would have been a fool to wanting to create something totally new and creating cameos with I don't know, a chair on it. But you always have to respect the fact that you have to take the past as your lesson, of course, and it's a great record of lessons, because you have not only numbers. I mean, you're only experienced in sales and in demographics and in manufacturing, but you have also the ability to innovate, just like staying put on what's been done. So everything new you do is just a new collection, and you don't have to do that much of a, you don't have to go crazy with an entirely new concept. You already have the concept, and maybe sometimes just taking something that was not good in the 70s, it's going to be great now. So you have an archive to work with, which is an incredible thing that happens all the time in fashion. I mean, a lot of you probably are studying fashion here. Like the most, and I have a lot of friends in fashion designers at a very high level too, and a lot is to do with archives and with flea markets and with going into the old vintage stores around the world, whether it's in Paris or in Milan, because from old things that necessarily didn't work at a time, now revised will make an incredible impact with what we know. The importance, though, of having a structure behind you teaches you also to be disciplined, and that's the most important thing. Of course, what was when I was 19 or 20, my nightmare of being stuck and framed into my family business, and I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. It becomes then the kind of like your training and your school for now, so that I know now I feel like an old man, because every time there is a problem in my company in New York, I already know how to deal with it, because I kind of experienced it. Even when I was not, I didn't realize it. I was, how do you say, per osmosis. I was just breathing and listening, and probably I wasn't paying attention, but it just stayed in the back of my mind, and it comes back easily. The problem on the other side is that, after, many years and hundreds of years, the challenge is how to innovate, how to come up with something new, how to provide your own customers something that's not been seen, that's not been done, or even to challenge your own team and the manufacturing in being creative. And that probably the answer is this, to let designers, manufacturers in our case, bench workers, to be creative, to welcome any sort of new idea, any new concept, experience, trying new materials. Absolutely, that's the best part. That's why in our business, in the cameo business, we do not keep our workers under one roof. We don't have a factory. When people say they come to Torre del Greco and to visit the factory, and sometimes they're big teams of people from Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, Japanese department stores like Isetan, and they want to, they send an email and say, we want to visit the factory. I organize everything that they come to our offices, where we prepare the materials, the collections and everything, the design, and then I jump on my Vespa and they get in a car with a driver, and we start driving through the little tiny streets of my town, which is a very, very small town on top of the volcano of the Vesuvio, because the entire town is an open-air factory, and each individual, each carver, each artist works at home. And by working at home, and they never worked in a factory environment, and by working at home, their creativity is it's the top you can get. If you put them, with a nice uniform in a factory environment, the most modern and efficient factory, with the best technology, they would lose totally their creativity, and we would lose everything, because that's what we sell. While they work at home, and everybody's always mesmerized by this. They work at home in very, very small, on a veranda. They have a bench. Everything is by hand, so there's no technology needed, and the wife is cooking the sauce in the kitchen next door. Then they go pick up the kids at school. So it's a very healthy and artistic environment, and that's exactly what it kept alive. Such a very tight tradition in the same place, in a small town for many, many generations. And actually, it's very interesting, because not only my family has been running the business for 6 generations, but most of our employees, of our carvers, and are themselves fifth generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation. So basically, their families and our families always been working together, and it's incredible to see still today young people just like your age going to school, fine arts school in the town. There is the only public high school, I think in the world, that's devoted, definitely in Italy, it's devoted to the cameo carving. So basically they major already in high school in cameo carving, and it was instituted by the King of Italy in the late 1800s. So rare it was, the tradition. So that's our challenge, actually my challenge nowadays, to keep more and more young people staying into the business. And it's interesting to notice how many will, as long as you give them the possibility to be creative and to do whatever they want, without telling them even what do you want. You just give them the material and say, just whatever, do anything. And sometimes they really do anything, and from that anything you get the new concept, the new trend, and the new product, and that's the beauty of it. Do you have questions? Please. Tell me more. I'm sorry? What I did was to actually, most likely to update the jewelry more than the cameos. Because I started from the idea that most women knew cameos as a souvenir from Italy, as a brooch, as grandma's kind of jewelry. And brooches are usually the oldest, although they're very in fashion now, but they're still a piece of jewelry that's usually worn by older generations. So I had to kind of like take that off the idea of the image of at least my cameos. So I started to use cameos mostly on rings, which was not the usual one, and very bold and very colorful. So I just tried to incorporate the classic cameos on very bold, colorful, and new materials, like ebony, large ebony rings with cameos on it, or rings made of blue agate or red agate, or very yellow jasper, very strong, colorful material as the band of the ring and the cameo on it. So you have like almost like a clash of old with new. And then obviously I kind of like change also some of the motifs. I started to do cameos with snakes. I started to do cameos with skull and bones. And like in instance, I started to do these rings with skull and bones, and pendants with skull and bones on cameos. And Harper's Bazaar featured some in the new hot thing, I think, last year. And it was crazy. It was crazy. And what happens in that case is that you notice people buying those cameos and always saying like, oh, I would have never worn a cameo. I mean, I always hated cameo, and now this is very cool. Because I just like had to give an idea that what you can do with that kind of manufacturing, not necessarily with doing the same product. So with the carving, you can do so many things. It's a handwork. And also, it's very good to always to have like incorporate new and old, because people want to be. Very few people are edgy enough to wear totally wacky things. So as long as there's something comforting, that because it's old, because it's sentimental, because it's romantic, but then that they wouldn't necessarily wear because they don't wear a brooch or they don't wear a pendant on a little chain, and you make it a cool ring, then they would wear it. So it's also, you always have to think artistically on one way, which is actually where I started from, because, I mean, if you think about it, it's all about the look. But then you have to also kind of like listen to people, to the customers. And in this case, it's like trunk shows and personal appearance in departments are great because even when somebody doesn't buy something and tells you, I love it, I don't buy it because, well, it's a gold mine. You're learning something incredible. It could be just the key to a new business. In another way, I realized that you can do like new things like skull and bones or snake, but you have to stay also very close to the core because that's, you don't, as I was saying before, you just don't throw 150 years of tradition and established business behind you, because you probably won't find it. And sometimes you will find that very editorially friendly jewelry doesn't translate to business. Most of the times, actually. Editors are great in finding new trends and new things, but it doesn't mean that those things are going to be incredible sales. So you have to find a balance. And I found actually the best way to balance these things is when I open my own store. Because when you open your own store, whether it's small or big and not in the best location, whatever you open gives you the ability to listen. It's your eyes and your ears, and that's what you want. You want to know what the real people think of it, not the fashionistas or the editors or the buyers, because they have another mindset when they're looking at the product. You want to know what real people think, and that's really your workshop. Your real workshop is the consumers. You lost it. Okay, it expired. Yes. Not really. I mean, they are inspired. Obviously, when you work in a small town and they have been learning the art from their parents or grandparents, and obviously there is an imprint. So, but what's interesting actually that even their inspiration, they don't realize it has changed. Basically, cameos in the 19th century, in the 18th century, beginning of the century, they were always inspired by Greek mythology, Greek-Roman mythology. Like all the goddesses that you can think of, Venus or Diana, or because neoclassical. There was the neoclassical era in the 19th century beginning, the discovery of the ruins of Pompeii and Herculaneum and in Rome, but now, actually, obviously, that's not the inspiration anymore. The younger generation are inspired probably more by Kate Moss and Claudia Schiffer, and not by the goddesses of the Roman mythology. So you see like a finer details. You can actually see from the profiles of the cameos that they carve that the woman that they envision is a totally different. It's like a modern woman. It's no more the one with the Greek-Roman strong features, exactly, the big nose, and it's very modern. It's probably they look at the fashion magazines and they see these beautiful girls, and then obviously they're inspired by that. Anything else? Any of you have been in a family business, come from family business? Yes? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually that's the funniest part. With Neiman Marcus, Neiman Marcus does a very fancy Christmas catalog every year. That's called the Fantasy Gift Book, because you can find anything. I mean, you can buy any submarine. Yeah, they actually sold one Egyptian sarcophagus for his and hers or whatever. So once, when I started with Sex and the City and thing, they called me and they said, we want you to make a cameo. People would send a picture and you'll do the portrait of them. So we did this page, and it was incredible, the response. I mean, people would just send pictures of their children, mostly their children, and the wife and things. But I will never forget that the first order that came in was a portrait of a dog. And that, which is very, it's kind of scary because it was $5,000. So it was a dog. And it came with the most beautiful letter from this woman. The dog's name was Rolex. It was a golden retriever, and she wanted to justify. She sent this letter with the order. She's saying that the Rolex, the dog's name was Rolex because like a few years back, her husband wanted to give her like a gold Rolex with diamonds, and she refused because she wanted a dog. And he kept insisting on the Rolex, and she wanted a dog. And she said, "I'm never gonna get a present from you unless you give me a dog." So finally, when she lost all her dream to have a dog, he finally came with a puppy and called Rolex with a little Rolex tag. And then she went on and on with, it was a very beautiful letter, that the husband died and she'd stay alone in this big ranch. So anyway, we did this dog, and we thought that it was crazy, that somebody would order a cameo with a dog on it. I'll tell you, after it's probably 10 years now, I still do. That's the biggest portrait that's ordered even to our boutique now. Always. The last one was a big Dalmatian. We had to do this big cameo. It's like $7,000, and it's a Dalmatian. And actually, she insisted that and the shell, it's only black in the background and white on the front, and she wanted the black spots. So we said, there's no such a shell. We can't make the spot. The spot is going to be the relief, but you're not going to see the spot. She insisted, so we had to enamel the spots to create this. It's funny. Actually, what's even more ironic is that we don't advertise the portraits. And yet, not only the cameos started as a portrait in the past, because when that was the cameos, from the 1800s, even in the Roman times, was the portraits of usually very wealthy or important people. Now people just go into the store and they look at everything and they think they are having a great idea so they ask, I have an idea. What if I give you a picture of my children and you make it into a cameo? And because that's, at the end of the day, that's the history of it, and that's what it is. Yes, but to answer your question, it's a very big business too. And also because that comes back to the idea that cameos are very sentimental jewelry. It's very romantic, but very sentimental. They stay in the family. I always say that if they say the grandma's cameos, it's like, oh, your grandma's cameo, and it's because there's a reason. You never say like, oh, grandma's pearls. Where's my grandma's peridot? It's because for some reasons a cameo keeps staying in the family for generations, and usually it's that one piece of jewelry that a grandmother wants to pass down to her daughter or granddaughter as a sign of love, as a symbol of love. There is something more to a cameo than a lot of other jewelry, much more than a diamond necklace, because there's something more. It's probably the fact that it's entirely handcrafted and it's a portrait of a person. Everybody buys a cameo with the specific. They all think they're buying something that reminds of themselves. Every woman who goes into my store, she will end up buying a cameo because she thinks that the cameo resembles herself in the hair, in the profile, and in something. There is a very strange chemistry between the buyer and the actual piece. Anything else? Please. No, that's very good. That's a very good point. I was going to go there. By the time I started to work on my cameo business and my family business, which is still a family business, my father reminds me every day that I'm not the sixth generation, I'm the son of the fifth, which is a very difficult to him. But I also started another company, always in the jewelry business, called Faraone Mennella, which it's a very contemporary line of gold jewelry, precious jewelry, and it's sold in, we have a boutique in Bergdorf Goodman, sells all in all Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus. We designed for Carolina Herrera all her runaway jewelry and her own haute couture jewelry sold in her boutiques. And we are quite successful with the press, my business partner and I, and with an incredible following, not only of media, of press, but also celebrities and a lot of celebrities, movies. But we never, every time somebody thinks that we have a PR agency, they're like always surprised to know that we never had one. We never hired a publicist, and we still don't. I mean, at this point, it's almost useless. And the reason why, because at the beginning, we didn't have the money for it, and any publicist will charge you a lot of money. In my opinion, obviously they cannot give you any guarantees of results. So it's an investment, and it's the last investment you want to do when you start a business, because there's a lot of things you have to manage and you have to invest in, like product, whether it's jewelry or fabric or staffing. And PR, comes last. Then we learned with time and on our own that if you call yourself an editor at a magazine, you have more chances to be listened to and to be given a chance than if you go through somebody else. I think that PR agencies and the publicists are good for major companies, because they don't have, at the time you become super successful, and you just don't have the time, and you don't want to be bothered. Or if it's for a market that you're not in, let's say in Germany, and you want to open a German office, so you hire a PR in Germany. But if you stay local, let's say, you want to start local, if you call Vogue magazine or Town & Country, they will listen to you, because there's one thing that we don't realize. Editors of magazines have a huge workload, and they have to get as much information as they possibly can for every issue. They're always on a deadline. They have hundreds of pages to fill with stuff, whatever it is. And after just a few months, sometimes that they work there, their inventive starts to be lacking, and they are open to anything. So if you call a magazine and say, "Listen, I'm a new designer. I'm doing this. I want to show you my collection," and my partner and I always walked into the magazines, and we just went there and called the editor, whether it's the fashion editor or accessory director, and they'll come and see. They will come and see you. They will come and see what you're doing, and they will come and see your product. And if they find something valuable in that, if they see talent, they will feature you or your product, because that's actually the biggest victory and the biggest pride, is to find new talents. And when they do, they're very happy, and they will support you, because it's easy, to go into, they can just go into the big advertisers and pull stuff from them. They need to show also the newness. And in this, probably say that in the fashion industry, you have Anna Wintour and Vogue. They're very, very good at it. They want to be always the ones to find the new designers, even when they're 13, as long as they're the first ones to feature them. And even if they're not sold anywhere. And in other magazines, whether for jewelry, in instance, whether it's Town & Country or W or Departures, you will always have somebody giving you a chance. At least they will look at what you're doing. So, and that's a very important thing, because it's almost like the biggest secret that nobody knows, and it's very important. If you don't know, people will tell you, "Oh my God, you have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to be in a magazine." It's not true. You just start, and you will see. Actually, in my business, we were in Town & Country, in Vogue, in W, in all the magazines, actually, for the first 6 months before having the product sold in stores. So that tells you that how it works. Please. Yes. It's a very good question, because now we are debating. We still have an incredible press coverage, even more than before. Covers and television and this. But at the beginning, it makes an incredible impact, gigantic, because at the beginning, you're a small company, of course, very small. So one editorial will eat up the entire business. You will have your phone number ringing all the time, the whole day. Once you have a distribution in place, let's say Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, so that and the brand is not super widely, but distributed across the country. At that point, you don't know anymore because they're calling every store. So if 50 people call 50 stores, you will never know. I mean, the product will sell, but you don't know how much is related to that cover of InStyle magazine. At the beginning, it's overwhelming because you don't expect it, and you realize how that important. I remember once we had, really at the beginning, this editorial on Glamour magazine, which really I had very little experience with. And they didn't put the price on these 2 rings, and they were like blown up, gigantic on the page. And it was like a hot trend for spring. We put our office number, and we were like 3 of us working. And the phone calls would not stop. We probably had hundreds because there was no price point. That was a very big mistake they did. So people didn't know. So it could be $50, $500, or $5,000. So you have there was no editing of customers. But it was unbelievable to the point that the next time they asked us, because it was really not our market, we had to create another number just for that, just for editorials, because otherwise our phones were jammed. But it is an incredible impact. There is some press that gives you credibility and builds up your press kit. It will not generate any sales, direct sales, but it will give you the credit to go into a meeting, let's say, and say, I've been featured in this, I've been featured in that, and that, it'll add up. It really adds up. Some others are really product-oriented and sales-oriented, and it's really depending on magazines and the different magazines, depending on what business you're going to be in. And they really just generate money, generate sales. So you got to make sure that whatever you featured in that one magazine, you have enough, or you can make enough later. I remember that with my cameos, we had a feature story, a little news flash, like a column, on New York Magazine, Best Bets, the Best Bets of New York Magazine, which at the time was edited by an editor who was quite famous for what she did, Rima Suki, and she was unapproachable, actually. You could not, that was one of the exception of the editors who you could not call, because her phone was like, actually her voicemail was, please do not leave a message because I will not go back. So it was there was you can send to New York Magazine. So she featured my cameos because it was new, it was something. At one point, she forgot to put, there was by appointment only, basically. The only place where I was selling was my office, my showroom. We had to put a sign on the door that people could only come with an appointment, because it was just like a train station. People would just come with, for months and months and months. And then I eventually became a very good friend of this girl, this editor, and she told me all of her stories, like, I forgot to tell you, but this is what happens with Best Bets and New York Magazine. Every time there's something, especially something new, it really changes the business. There was she had stories about a guy making pottery in the East Village that she featured, and soon he opened 3 more stores, or fashion designers with a little new accessory, because it's some magazines are just like shopping guides, and that's what you want. Some others are for building the press kit, which is very important. Please. No. Well, first of all, I think that first I have to say that even if you use a computer or computer software, you still need a designer behind the machine. So because a designer is not necessarily somebody who can do a technical drawing of something, but if he wants or she wants to be a designer, it's more about the sensibility and the lifestyle that he or she is creating with that drawing. I mean, just a technical drawing will not envision an entire lifestyle. And nowadays in fashion or jewelry, in the luxury industry, you have to, every piece that you make, it has to represent a lifestyle, whether it's sport and chic or super elegant and red carpet. So the computers are not going to be. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's going to take the job of many people. In my cases, actually, the computer is not going to take anybody's job because it's all hand carved. It's all handmade. It's not even. There's not even need of a design. I mean, we just get on it with the hand tools and carve the seashells. So. In other cases, like my jewelry collections, my other line, which is all gold, and yes, you can create a design with computer softwares. I find that it's never what I want. I mean, we kind of like tried, and but it's too much of a dead. Kind of drawing. I mean, something. I'm always like. I think our best designs always came out of an idea, not a software. I don't think so, unless you need it for very, 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 very cheap product that has to be sold in huge mass markets. So it's just a matter of like creating variation on the same thing. So with the computer, you can do that. Please. Yes. Very good. I wanted to say that because that's very easy. First of all, you have to, there's the master of editors in every magazine. There's a page with, it says editor-in-chief, and you go down the list, and you didn't know that? Well, depends on who you call. Then you have to learn. First of all, you got to be persistent. I mean, it's not that it's gonna. But I'll tell you honestly, my experience. 'Cause that's what I can tell. I don't know other people would do. In one case, for jewelry business, it's very important town and country. Town and country is like considered one of the jewelry bibles for some reasons, and really is the one that, because it's very social, it's very upscale, so that jewelry it's part of that lifestyle. And I figured out basically the email of the editor-in-chief, because you always have an email at the end that says, for somebody, maybe somebody selling advertising. And from that email, you can figure out everybody else's email if you have the name and last name. And I did sell an email to the editor-in-chief of Town and Country, Pamela Fiori, and I also did send an email to Anna Wintour years ago. Everybody's very scared of her. She's like the devil, West Prada, blah blah blah. It's not true. They're all great professionals, and whether or not they will probably like what you do, they may not. They may, but they will answer. And that's what happened to me. I sent just an email and saying, I'm a new designer. I'm coming from Italy, and I really love to show you my product. But I'll tell you, I still do that. I still, just recently, to be honest, I realized that we were never featured in Robb Report, which is a very important magazine too for the luxury industry. And I just sent an email to the editor-in-chief of the magazine, figuring out, I was in a plane. I was like, why are we never in this magazine? So I figured out the name of the editor-in-chief. I sent her an email, and a few days later, she called to make an appointment. I think it's much more important to them to get emails. It feels more important to them than you may think, because they need new ideas. They're always on the lookout for new ideas, editors. Maybe you just send it to the wrong ones, but if I can give you a suggestion, just like shoot for the best. Just start with the editor-in-chief, because sometimes you're sending it to an assistant who really has no saying in it, and others will. Sure. What are you guys studying generally? Fashion mostly? Merchandising. Jewelry design. Very little questions for jewelry designers, huh? Yes. The shells are always the same. It's two types of shells. One is called the orangey one, the very typical cameo. It's called Cassis rufa, which means red shell, I guess the scientific name in Latin, and it's found in Africa, in Madagascar and Mozambique and Kenya. And the other one that we use, it's the darker shells, cameos. It's called Cassis madagascariensis, and despite the name, which means shell from Madagascar, it's actually coming from the Caribbean. And you know, everybody thinks that you can use any kind of shell to cover cameo. It's not true, because we have to work on a few layers. We have to carve on a few layers of material. So we really need some specific shells with multi-layers so that we have enough material, enough meat to work on. So after a few hundred years, we kind of like experience the ones that we need. No. No, because it wouldn't show. There is kind of demand, but it's mostly used in, we use sometimes jet. It's easier to carve. Also because you want to do something with multicolor to have a relief, and also you want to see the design, you want to see the carving. No, it's mostly one of a kind. Each one is a one of a kind. And not because we want it to be a one of a kind, but mostly because it's made by one person from the beginning to the end, and it's like the signature. You can repeat it as many times as you want; it will never be the same. You have any questions? You have a question. How hard? No, I can't hear you. Yes, it breaks. No, I'm saying the shells break. I always tell people, even customers, when I say how hard it is. If you throw it on the floor and step on it, it will break, and we're not going to be able to fix it. And for the same reasons, we have to carve it very carefully, because if we make a mistake and the nose gets chipped off, it's gone. But it's not as fragile as as glass. Please.
How long does each cameo take to carve, and the artist responsible for carving it? Do they pick out the shell and cover it?
No, we in the company, we prepare the shells, we provide them with the shells, we actually cut the shells in the shapes and the size that we want. How long it takes to each carver, it's really, it's not given to know, even to us, because they work, as I told you, they work at home, and it's almost like their biggest secret. Nobody wants to know, and usually it's kind of typical of every artisan, not just in the cameo business. Artisans or even artists, they will never let you know how long it took to make a piece, and it's also understandable, because then you would judge the result by the time spent, and it's not that shouldn't be the way to judge it. You can be a great talent and be fast, and you can be you can spend like months and months on something else, and it's really bad. We have about 150 working for us. Absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, and actually I have to say Japan, which is the one of the biggest market for cameos, there is like museums for some of the carvers. There is fan clubs. And it's very, very, very expensive cameos there. They in the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a piece. Yeah. Yes, and, yeah, just like for any other form of arts, like painting and sculpting, you can just once you are accustomed to see a few, you'll know You'll know. Please. Oh yeah. Actually, a lot, and probably even in the past, it was even more about scenes, mythological scenes, than silhouettes. But there's a lot of flowers. I mean, really, there's no end. It depends on carvers. Some carvers actually don't even carve silhouettes. They don't even want to. They just carve sceneries, landscapes, or just like as we say, paesaggi, like the beautiful landscapes of the Bay of Naples or the Grand Canal in Venice. And there's really no limit. Right. Yes, we do that also in Torre del Greco. The only thing is that for some reasons we are not very. It's not very commercial. Our town. It's not. You won't find a million stores selling or factories open to the public because really they work at home. So actually, sometimes it's much more fun when I can bring somebody to their home and look at what they're doing, because at the end of the day, it's much simpler than it may be and it may seem. It's just really like a guy painting or sculpting. One bench, they work only with the sunlight and with a bunch of hand tools and carving. It's about the art, more about the technique and the technology applied to it. Well, the largest one, the shells are this big, so you're not going to get anything gigantic, and it's always, it's always thought for jewelry. So you don't want to do. But I like big pieces, so the big necklaces and big things. So the biggest we do probably is about 5 inches in diameter. So it's pretty big, but not bigger than that. You just don't get it bigger than that. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think that after my second $1 billion, I could say yes, but I don't think so. Fortunately, it's a niche of a market, and also you don't realize one thing, that the shell is the it's the home of an animal. So basically, when we find the shell, it means that there was an animal that had just died or left. So it's not the animal itself, like would be coral, like would be ivory. Professor, thank you for joining. No, we buy. That's very interesting because there is no shell shop, as we say. So we have to find our own resources and just for ourselves. And so what we do, because the shells grow in shallow waters, and it's usually in the same waters where they find lobsters. So basically, we hire the lobsters, the fishermen. They go on to lobsters. So then, when it's off the season of the lobsters, they do us the favor to pick up the shells for us and put it in their backyard until we need them. And yeah, that's what it is. Because it's very specific. They're always in the same spots, and and there is no really an industry for that, for just like shells for cameos. Yeah. Well, you don't really manage. You try. I think in a time like this, there's a difference though, because we're a niche market and we're really in the highest segment of the luxury industry. It's never that tough. in that industry, because in these times, in this economy, it's the middle level that gets hurt the most. You will always have like women shopping for couture, actually. That's never gonna go away, but it's very limited. It's like there's like 300 customers for haute couture in the world, 300 ladies. So those 300 ladies will still shop. They're not gonna be scared of CNN breaking news. And in the same way for high-end jewelry is the same thing. Also jewelry, the difference between jewelry and fashion, though, is that jewelry at least has that investment property to it, that investment value to it. So, technically, the husband is going to prove more of spending $10,000, $20,000 on a piece of jewelry than on a gown that probably next season is not going to be in fashion anymore. While at least there's the gold, there's a value. There's a value right there. But in this market, what really gets hurt is the middle level. Good point. Excuse me? Well, you know what? When you buy a cameo, you buy the art that's on it. Diamond as a value, it's like a currency. Diamond and gold, it's just like currency. So it's different. In cameos, you're buying the artistic labor that's on it. And usually that appreciates. In fact, it's very hard to find very good old cameos for nothing. Although you have a lot of diamonds, diamond jewelry that gets depreciated for some reasons, because like currencies, they go up and down. But cameos, because of it's such a small offer, because it comes from like just one small town, and there is not enough to even to even saturate the market, one market. So you'll never have this problem. I mean, it just like appreciates with time. Please.
I have a little question and a big question. The little question is, do you make camesi?
I'm sorry?
Camesi, the cameos with stones encrusted in them, enamel stones.
Oh, okay. You mean like mosaic, like inlay?
No, there would be a cameo and she would be wearing a diamond necklace.
Oh, yeah. How do you call that?
Camesi, that's what I read it was called in American language.
Oh, okay. I never heard about it.
It's very traditional in Italy.
Yeah.
As you said, they're passed on from one to
Yes.
another. When they became fashionable here, did that bounce back to Italy as a fashion statement for young people, as opposed to
No, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say, just because I'm Italian, I don't want to say anything that sounds, but Italians are very, they, like French. Italian and French really don't get trends from, from anywhere else. I mean, they're very stubborn and, yeah. No, I don't want to say, it's probably because in Italy and France, you have a lot of, couturier or jewelry, a lot. So, the trend also starts from the factory, to be honest, to what you see. So we really don't get influenced by other countries. We get influenced in the movies. We get influenced, in the music industry. We don't get influenced in the fashion or in the luxury industry, for sure. That's this I can tell for sure. Don't ask me why. But no, it doesn't bounce back. Actually, I'll tell you something else. Italians get a little bit less fascinated by cameos than anybody else, because being something so Italian, something like really made in their own backyard, they look at it in a way that we've always seen it. It's there. While the farther you go and the more, like Japanese created an incredible boom for cameo, for the business of cameos in the 80s. Gigantic. They were absorbing probably 70% of the production and pushing it up to like very luxury level. Why? Because it was the first time they were like exposed to such a artifact that was so reminiscent of the Renaissance, of everything they see in the Uffizi Gallery or in Pompeii or the museum in Rome, and so they wanted to have it, to possess. While for Italians, they always had it for hundreds of years. It's there. So it will never be a trend or not a trend. It's there. It's a classic. Please. Yeah, well, the true seashell, it's, first of all, I always say the imperfection. Something that's made by hand, it's always not perfect. Something that's made by hand is never perfect. If something looks too perfect, you have to doubt it. And the second thing is that if the shell cameos are translucent, so if you put it on the light, they're translucent, you see the light through it. When they're fake, they're usually made out of resin or plastic, they're not translucent. Yeah. On Lexington and 70th, the Upper East Side. Oh my God. My number? Just kidding. How private is that? Okay, that's fine. Sure. Yes. We got private questions here. Sorry. Anybody has one question? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having. Is this it? Ooh. Thank you.
and it sounded really cool.
Yeah, but New York Magazine used to have those Absolute ads where you got gloves and
Right.
stuff inside, and or you'd open it up and it would play Christmas songs. Isn't it just like the next generation of
Yeah,
that?
it seems that way. You know, it made us a little crazy because we have a 40th anniversary issue. You know, obviously that will be coming out a week after Esquire's, and you know, we don't have an electronic cover. Our cover just sits there.
Any other questions? We have time for maybe one more question. Over here on the left.
Hi. You talked a little bit about extending to the web to be a news site, and mostly talked about how when you became a news site in New York, it had some sort of availability of images. Do you find that now that a lot of us are sort of sitting in front of computers, absorbing images all the time, absorbing information all the time, that that's changed the way magazines are designed? And does it mean that the magazines have to be faster paced, or does it mean that they have to be more considerate? And do you like that that's the new magazine design? If it is, what do you think?
It's for you, Chris.
Who wants to take that one?
I didn't understand the question.
Are you basically saying web design affecting magazine design?
Magazine design.
Okay.
Has web design changed magazine design?
Or are you saying that the consumer of seeing websites is affecting the way they respond to magazine design?
Well, do you think about how are they going to respond to these images as opposed to how they're going to respond to the ones that they see all day when they're sitting in the computer?
So you're talking about photography on the web versus photography in a magazine.
How's the presentation of information?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're two completely different mediums, and I think, as Adam said, you know, we create specific stuff for the medium of the printed magazine and take advantage of that with the scale and the size and the pacing that's going to happen. And then, you know, in the transfer of that information, it takes on a whole different life on the web. You know, for a lot of the sections, they do use the same imagery, the illustrations, the photography, the slideshows, you know, the conceptual work that's been done, and they just repurpose it in ways, and it just has a different relationship on the web, and it's more immediate. So I think that in terms of our magazine, they feed back and forth to each other. For me personally, I don't approach the magazine design any differently with the basis on the web. If anyone else?
Although one of the things that just happened recently is that one of the ways that on Mondays for like a minute and a half, they actually use our cover on the web. The cover story cycles through so many different. They have their own cover stories and all that stuff. And when the web designers actually took our cover pictures, they sort of changed them in little ways to make it work for the web, and they make them a square, and as soon as they alter them in sort of webby kind of ways, and that actually, we kind of liked the way that was looking, and so and so this was actually a weird future past thing, because we have started to think to try to create a cover in that window, in that same kind of window that the web has, which made it gave it the effect of looking like the actually original design that you guys created. So that you may notice here, and we have done it, about 6 or 7 times in the last 3 months. We went back to that old box. I don't know what you ever call that thing. The box where you only use 2/3 of the cover, and that came weirdly not from the old thing as much as it did from the little TV screen that the web was using. But that didn't have to do with the sort of speed of imagery. It just was like, wow, this looks good, squat and short and weird.
All right. Well, I think we should all give these guys a big round. Thank you all very much for coming out.
Thank you guys for coming, and we will see you on September 22nd for the first Speakeasy event with Rem Duplessis. Thank you guys.